Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we are changing the mental health narrative, bringing hope and solutions. Here's your host, Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist.
Dr. David Gruder playfully refers to himself as a recovering psychologist and professional troublemaker. In actuality, he is a 12 award-winning, best-selling integrative psychologist who Radio TV interview report named America's integrity expert. Drawing on an unparalleled range of board leadership, training, consulting, business, and clinical roles that he has filled over the past 5 decades, he founded the Center for Enlightened Self-Sovereignty. Its purpose is to help usher in spiritually elevated next chapter in humanity. Through the center, Dr. Gruder works with concerned citizens, government and community leaders, business owners and executives, influencers in the media, education, and the helping professions to maximize their positive impact in their respective fields. Good afternoon, Dr. Gruder. It's great to see you again.
It's great to see you again, too, Dr. Hayes.
I look forward to this opportunity to discuss your latest project. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started on this and what drives your passion for it?
Oh, my. Yeah, I certainly can. And how far do you want me to go back? I mean, I could go back to 6 years old in terms of where this all had its roots.
Well, I don't know how fast can you go from 6 years old to where you are.
Well, here's what I'll say about the seeds of this. I got really deeply touched as a 6-year-old when my family received a New Year's card from a family friend that had a message that simply said, it was a UNICEF New Year's card, and the message was, the greater peace will only come after the smaller peace we make with each other. And even though I was only 6 years old, that message went straight into the cells of my being, and it became central to what was important to me. And what I would add to it is that the greater peace will only come after the smaller peace we make with ourselves and each other.
Right.
But of course, at 6 years old, I didn't have that level of discernment. So that was added on later. And then when I was 15, my parents sent me to Woodstock. Now, they didn't know what they were sending me to beforehand.
You mean the music festival?
The music festival, the infamous music festival in 1969. And they thought they were sending me to, a music and arts fair because that's what it was. But nobody knew what the 1969 Woodstock experience was going to end up being. And so I thought I was going there for the music. And what I discovered I had gone there for that I could never have anticipated was to have my worldview completely reshaped over 3 days. And the reshaping has everything to do with my life's work, which is why I'll share this one additional story in answering your question. First of all, the reason that my parents sent me to Woodstock was because I was very involved in performing growing up, and my parents were kind enough to somehow rustle up enough money to send me to a camp for the performing arts in the summertime. And so the spring of '69, the camp director sends a message home, a letter to all the parents saying, for the first time in the camp's history, we're going to have an optional field trip to this music and arts fair in upstate New York. Do you want to send your kid? So that's how I ended up at 15 years old being at Woodstock.
Wow.
And what got blown open for me was that I felt and experienced underneath the cliche in the 1960s that said sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And what I got to experience was that underneath the sex part of the cliche, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, was this yearning for a deeper kind of intimacy than just the societal expectation of a marriage contract. And underneath the drugs part of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll cliche was my generation, our generation, seeking a deeper sense of authenticity than the conformity that had been installed in US culture and then around the world in the 1950s. And the rock and roll part of the cliche was that for the first time in the history of music, lyrics were appearing in songs that were telling us that we had more power to change the world than we ever thought we did. And those three pulls, authenticity, connection, and impact, I came to realize are what animate us as human beings. And when we're out of integrity with any one of those, one or more of those three core drives, as I call them, we have problems with ourselves, we have problems with each other, and we have problems with the larger groups that we choose to be part of. And so that lifelong quest has been around integrating our three core drives, integrating authenticity, connection, and impact, and integrating the fundamentals that gave rise to the original version of the American dream when the United States was first coming into existence, which was to create a society that functioned at the intersection of, if I can use the Constitution's wording, preserving personal freedom and promoting the common good, that it wasn't either or, it needed to be an integration between the two.
So that's quite the challenge. And I believe I've heard you speak about how, as we came out of the Second World War, we've had some distortions in our structuring of our culture and our economy that haven't really allowed that integration to be top of mind, to say the least, or to make it even easy or reasonable to try and keep that integration going.
That's very, very true. There were some beliefs that were quite deliberately installed in the 1950s, first in the United States and then spread around the world, because, of course, at that point in history, a lot of the world looked to the United States as kind of a beacon of a free country, a beacon of personal freedom and a prosperous society. And those, do you want me to unpack what those
Please.
things were? Sure. Well, the short version of the story is that at the end of World War II, Harry Truman was president of the United States, and he had two overriding concerns. One concern was about keeping the economy growing in peacetime, because he was well aware, as were others, that the economy had roared back from the Great Depression of the 1930s on a wartime footing. It was really World War II that helped the United States and other parts of the world recover from the Great Depression. And he wanted the economy to not be dependent on war in order to keep growing. So that was his first concern. His second concern was brought about because the Nazi minister of propaganda, Herr Joseph Goebbels, fashioned his propaganda campaigns that were very successful for a period of time after the published works of an American named Edward Bernays, who was acknowledged during his lifetime to be the father of modern public relations. And so he was concerned that if that could happen in Germany, that it could happen anywhere. And so he assembled a group of politicians and business people and charged them with coming up with a plan for keeping the economy growing in peacetime and minimizing the chances that what happened to the Germans when Nazi Germany propaganda took over could happen here in the United States. And what they hatched was what they called the American dream. And that 1950s version of the American dream completely rewrote the definition of the pursuit of happiness. So the original definition of the pursuit of happiness, brought about when the United States was first coming into existence, was that the pursuit of happiness, if you can imagine a triangle, and at the top of the triangle is the pursuit of happiness, and at the base of each corner are two ingredients that enable the pursuit of happiness to occur. And the one ingredient is personal freedom, and the other ingredient is the common good. And so what happened was that in the 1950s, the pursuit of happiness, first of all, was redefined as excessive consumerism,
Right.
to keep the economy growing. And the personal freedom part was recast as social conformity, where we were going to conform to the notion of the good life that was created in this 1950s version of the American dream. So the house with the white picket fence and the two-car garage and the dog and the cat and the 1.8 children. Of course, I'm being facetious. And the vacations and the latest consumer appliances and conveniences and all of that. And then the common good was redefined as overwork, where people were in the workforce were expected to work longer and longer hours in order to climb the corporate ladder, in order to make more and more money working for a company whose values they didn't necessarily agree with. And so this restructuring of the pursuit of happiness was a turning point in the deterioration of the United States, as far as I'm concerned. And of course, then around the world, because like I said earlier, the American dream was adopted by a large part of the rest of the world as well.
Well, and one of the key components is the focus almost exclusively on the physical.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many ways to take a look at that, but just to expand or to kind of reinforce what you were just saying is, if I'm not thinking that the higher good is part of that formula, it's simply, I'm going to conform and I'm going to help my economy and I'm going to help my nation by being a good consumer.
And my family, if I'm the breadwinner.
It's all about the physical.
Absolutely.
It's not about the mental, emotional, or spiritual or other, subtle energetics.
No.
Which
Definitely.
isn't to say they don't exist. We know that subtle energetics do exist, and our science is even continuing to develop devices that can measure it, but it measures things that our senses can't measure. So these other energies and interaction patterns are there, but if we aren't focusing on them, we aren't aware of them.
Without a doubt.
And if we aren't, it's like Einstein said about the precious gift and the faithful servant. The precious gift is the intuitive mind, and the faithful servant's the conscious logical mind. But we live in a culture we aren't teaching our children about their intuitive mind and their creativity. And the other part of Einstein's observation is, perhaps the more devastating, is we've elevated the conscious logical to the level of master.
Right. The tail is wagging the dog.
Instead of it being a servant of practical things when we're dealing directly in the physical realm, we've been trained to try and find answers to all of our energetic, subtle energetic, spiritual, emotional relationship issues through the logical, rational mind, and it just doesn't work.
Yes. And so we see these kinds of splits reflected in society today, where some people are over addicted to overthinking. Some people are operating out of this faulty happiness formula that the formula for happiness is excessive consumerism and power and things along those lines. And then there are other people that are operating from what they often don't know is a distorted version of spirituality, where they're doing what's these days commonly referred to as spiritual bypass, where they're pursuing altered states of consciousness, or they're pursuing developing their intuition without simultaneously keeping their feet on the ground. So they're doing it in order to essentially avoid dealing with the baggage that they carry, the unresolved trauma that continues to live in their system while they're pursuing transcendent states of consciousness. And then they're wondering, well, I'm pursuing higher consciousness. Why isn't my life different? Why don't I feel different? Well, it's spiritual bypass, as they call it, like I said. So we've got these groups that are all pursuing distorted versions of happiness today.
Yeah, my mind's racing as you're talking about that, because there are a number of people that, like you in the project that you started here, are trying to help people stay grounded in basic fundamentals and dealing with what Jung would call the shadow side of things, while growing and expanding their capacity for tuning into other energies and other levels of philosophical and or spiritual growth.
Mm-hmm. Yes, without a doubt. Let me tell you a brief story connected to this that was told to me by the daughter. This is years ago. I don't think she's still alive, but the daughter of one of the founders of the League of Nations, which was the international body that preceded the United Nations. And her father's greatest disappointment in life, she was telling me, was that he was trying to get the League of Nations founders to understand the importance of incorporating psychological wisdom into how they functioned. And he couldn't succeed. He didn't succeed at getting that woven into the fabric of the culture of the League of Nations. And of course, the UN followed in those same mistaken footsteps, and other groups have followed in those footsteps as well, which I got a firsthand taste of in, I think it was 2004, when I was brought over to Geneva, Switzerland to train a group of World Trade Organization ambassadors. And they had no idea that there was any form of problem solving or negotiation other than coercion or compromise. They had no clue about how to do collaboration or synergy as a problem solving and negotiation method. So even today, there's this poo-pooing of psychological wisdom and this poo-pooing of the importance of dealing with shadow, not only from a lot of high influence leaders, but also on the part of certain individuals and groups in the spiritual elevation realms, where they're trying to bypass dealing with shadow while pursuing higher states of consciousness.
Well, and it strikes me that the kind of thing that I talk to people about in therapy sessions and have for decades now is that if they continue using the tools that we can offer in solid psychological work and do their own introspection, they will soon find they're one of the healthiest people they know, because most of the adults, and I mean full-fledged adults, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, most of the adults they run into are still functioning at the social emotional level of high school.
Exactly.
And that's even those who don't have addiction problems, right? If you hang out in addiction circles, they'll tell you, if I started using drugs heavy or drinking heavy when I was 16, and when I'm 40 or 50, I decide I got to get sober. When I'm 40 years old and I quit drinking and I started when I was 16, my emotional development's probably about a 16-year-old.
Oh,
Mostly,
yes.
mostly because I was running from emotional difficulties and discomforts into alcohol. even without that, what I tell people is this is what you're describing, the manipulation or coercion, that's high school level stuff. That's not, really bright, intelligent, creative human communication at work. That's low level, you know, who's the strongest, who's the smartest, who's going to get the most, who's going to grab. It's like the Hungry Hippos game. We just grab.
Yep. Yep. And the
So
same is true in spiritual circles. There was a book that was published, really short read, decades ago now, called Your God is Too Small. And the whole focus of the book was not connected to the addiction recovery community. It was really geared toward the religious and spiritual communities. And the premise of the theologian who wrote this book was that most people's version of higher love and wisdom or source or God or whatever term they use for that is stuck in childhood. It never grew up. It never matured.
So as we're talking about this, I see two components we want to talk about. The hijacking of humanity, as you call it, and the revisioning of humanity. How far are we into you helping us understand what you call the hijacking of humanity?
Well, we've dipped our toes in. It might be helpful if I briefly describe the five aspects of the hijacking of humanity that I think have collectively the greatest negative impact on humanity.
Please do.
So we talked about the first of those, which is the hijacking of happiness, people functioning from a faulty happiness formula. The second I refer to as the hijacking of health, where health got redefined as symptom control rather than optimal health.
Right.
There was this unholy alliance that kind of organically, if I can kind of ironically use that term, developed organically between two industries. One industry was the part of the food industry that a lot of people referred to as big ag, but big agriculture, but it's mostly the part of the food industry that makes massive profits overselling things that pass as though they're food, but actually create illness when those things are consumed in regular and large quantities. And so the unholy alliance is between that portion of the food world and the portion of the medical and pharmaceutical world, which is, again, like I said about the food world, it's not the whole world, but
right.
The portion of the pharmaceutical and medical world that is focused on controlling the symptoms that the illnesses that the fake foods create. And when you get this unholy alliance between the fake food industry and the symptom control industry, you get the hijacking of health. So that's the second hijacking. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And then should I keep going?
Please.
Yeah. The third hijacking is the hijacking of prosperity, where we actually there's a lot of sentiment, negative sentiment about capitalism. But what people who have a negative attitude about capitalism don't realize is that what they're really rebelling against is two distortions of capitalism that are still called capitalism even though they're not. One is sociopathic capitalism. Think Monsanto, for example, companies that make massive profits off of harming people and the environment and things like that. And debtism, which was installed as part of the American dream, the 1950s version of the American dream. And debtism is borrowing against an uncertain future through consumer debt and things like that in order to prop up the appearance of a lifestyle in the present that's supposed to make us happy. And that is not capitalism, that's debtism. So when you combine debtism and sociopathic capitalism, and that becomes what people think of as capitalism, of course they should be anti-capitalism. Of course they should be. Most people don't even know what healthy capitalism is supposed to look like. So that's the hijacking of prosperity right there. That makes sense before I go on to the fourth?
Yes.
And
so you've left this gap there where we haven't defined healthy capitalism.
You want me to do that now?
I think that'd be good. Put that in here. So what's an alternative to
debtism and sociopathic capitalism?
Exactly. Those two words that weren't coming to me. The sociopathic capitalism and the debtism. What's the alternative that you're calling healthy capitalism? How would you describe that?
Well, I describe it actually as a fake formula, meaning something that sounds like a formula, but it's not mathematical. And the formula is money equals, and I'm going to unpack these abbreviations right now, but money is PLE times C over A. And what that's a fake formula for is money is, the P is portions, LE is our life energy, portions of our life energy in a converted form. And the converted form is trading portions of our life energy for money over A, and the A is agreements. So when if I came to you for psychotherapy, I would be deciding that the portion the portion of my life energy that I converted into money was an appropriate amount of converted life energy for me to get what I'm hoping I'll get from you in psychotherapy at the rates that you're charging. And so we enter into an agreement that the amount that you're charging for your life energy, for me to access your converted life energy in the form of psychotherapy, is right matched, it's ethically and integriously right matched with the amount of my life energy that I have converted into money that I'm going to give to you in
that you'll get
return.
That you'll get a balancing value from it.
Precisely. And that's what real capitalism is supposed to be about. It's actually supposed to be a mechanism for individuals to exert personal freedom through agreement, through authentic agreement, not manipulated agreement, what we call in the healthcare and psychotherapy fields informed consent, in contrast to what Edward Bernays called manufactured consent, which is manipulated consent. We're entering into agreements that the amount of life energy it's going to cost me to access the life energy you've converted into something that I want is equitable. And those are decisions that individuals make with each other, or an individual makes with a company that they buy something from. It's not some kind of universal formula that everyone is supposed to abide by, because then personal freedom is eliminated. That's healthy capitalism.
Okay. And it takes quite a bit to evaluate that on an ongoing basis, but when you've got your individual freedom, you can do that. When you're living in this balanced state of autonomy and balancing that, as you said earlier, with the highest good, the common good, then
yes,
you can make decisions that are appropriate for you.
And when you understand that money is nothing more and nothing less than portions of our life energy in a converted form, that's the linchpin that people are not taught in school.
Right. Okay.
Or in their families. So that's the hijacking of prosperity. The fourth hijacking, okay, to move on to that, or did you want to?
Yep, go right ahead.
The fourth hijacking is the hijacking of patriotism. Patriotism has been hijacked in that people are defining patriotism in these days in two very divisive and extreme forms, both of which are incomplete and create massive problems. One group defines patriotism as don't tread on me, personal freedom above everything else.
Right.
And if you don't like what I'm doing, if what I'm doing has negative impact on you, that's your problem, not mine. Get over it. And then the other group is saying that the common good is more important than personal freedom. And those people are basically saying that that conformity is more important than authenticity. And the truth that I believe the founders of the United States really tapped into and understood was that personal freedom without social responsibility is narcissism. And social responsibility without personal freedom is tyranny. And so patriotism has gotten hijacked because we've got one group calling patriotism personal freedom over everything, and the other group calling patriotism the common good over everything. They're both equally and oppositely insane. So patriotism has been hijacked.
Okay. So now you've got happiness has been hijacked, health has been hijacked,
Prosperity has been
prosperity has been hijacked, and
patriotism. And there's a fifth hijacking, which is the hijacking of problem solving. Because in today's divisive, politically polarized world, as I was referring to earlier, only 2 out of the 3 forms of problem solving are being used: coercion and compromise. And I don't think we need to go into the reasons why coercion is so toxic to individuals and groups. But the reason that compromise is toxic, except if it's a necessary backup plan because people are unwilling to participate in collaboration or synergy. So other than as a backup plan, the best attainable outcome with compromise is all people walk away from the negotiating table or the problem solving table feeling equally ripped off. That's the best attainable outcome. And if it's not equally ripped off, then one group feels more ripped off than the other group, and they're pretending that that's compromise. It's a dysfunctional strategy.
Understood.
So when we have a society that's practicing coercion or compromise at best, we have problem solving having been completely hijacked and creating all of the hyperpolarization, hyperdivisiveness dynamics that we're seeing in society today.
And of course, you've said the word once or twice, but the alternative to coercion or compromise is collaboration.
Yes.
Cooperation, collaboration, etc.
Which is a skill that is talked about by some, but very few people have actually been trained in the fundamentals of how collaboration occurs. And so, yes, there are some people that are just addicted to coercion or compromise, but of those who really see the merits in collaboration, virtually no one has been trained in the mechanics of collaboration.
So what are the results as you see them, as you describe them, of these 5 hijackings? What's the ripple effect that we're looking at as, okay, these are pain points, these are problems, these are hurdles for us to get over and resolve?
The one way of my answering your question is by saying that the Associated Press, the AP, has done surveys for the last number of years, surveys during the Trump administration and surveys during the Biden administration on American sentiments about whether our country is moving in a good direction or a bad direction. And regardless of which administration we're talking about, a Republican administration or a Democratic Party administration, 80 to 85% of Americans say we're headed in the wrong direction. So, what are the symptoms? All of the things that that cause people to feel like we're moving in the wrong direction, which are things like chronic stress, huge amounts of fear, chronic anger and rage. These and rebellion, or what we call in our field learned helplessness. Those are the big symptoms of a dysfunctional society.
I guess it's all just hopeless then.
Well, that's what the learned helplessness camp insists on.
Well, so
right?
so the overview of the problem side, you're talking about offering a solution and offering people a program to help develop a solution. But before we move into the solution side, the overview of the problem with these 5 hijackings.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you want to add to that, or give a quick summary of, so that we're going to talk about that problem, and then we're going to take a breather and then talk about what the CESS gives us for building solutions?
Sure. What I'll add is 2 things. One is that the reason that I think it's important for people to understand these spells, as I refer to them, these 5 societal hijackings and something else I'll touch on in a moment. The reason for understanding these things is not to wallow in them. It's because treatment without diagnosis is malpractice. So unless we understand the nature of the root causes of the problems we're trying to solve, we can't treat the problems effectively. So that's the only reason that I articulate these problem states, is so that people have clarity about what needs to be solved, not so that they can stay stuck in those things or be victimized by them. The other thing that I'll say in conclusion is that those 5 hijackings are what I call societal spells, that collectively we are under. And when I say collectively, I'm using that term because there are individuals who haven't been taken in by those spells, but collectively those spells are very much in operation. And then the other level of spells, if you will, are what I call personal spells. And personal spells are our own survival plans that we adopt in childhood to survive what I refer to as undigested life experiences we have that we don't know how and aren't helped to turn into blessings and gifts. And my term undigested life experiences is just another way of saying trauma structure. So when you combine societal spells with personal spells, which is the addiction to a childhood survival plan that we were brilliant enough to intuitively construct as children, that then became so automatic and unconscious that we brought that survival plan with us into adulthood and have kept living from that survival plan long after we needed it in order to survive. Those 2 spells categories, societal spells and personal spells, are what needs to be healed from in order for society and individuals to experience an elevated future.
Dr. David Gruder playfully refers to himself as a recovering psychologist and professional troublemaker. In actuality, he is a 12-award-winning, best-selling integrative psychologist who Radio TV Interview Report named America's integrity expert. Drawing on an unparalleled range of board leadership, training, consulting, business, and clinical roles that he has filled over the past 5 decades, he founded the Center for Enlightened Self-Sovereignty. Its purpose is to help usher in spiritually elevated next chapter in humanity. Through the center, Dr. Gruder works with concerned citizens, government and community leaders, business owners and executives, influencers in the media, education, and the helping professions to maximize their positive impact in their respective fields. He also provides keynotes, training programs, mentoring, consulting, books, videos, and media appearances. Through all of these activities, he equips leaders, influencers, and concerned citizens with the missing spiritual inner and outer skills for maximizing their positive impact in their chosen spheres of influence. Dr. Gruder's main website is drgruder.com.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.